My guest today is, especially after the past year, an author who's been slapping some smiles on book lovers across the world as a result of her standout debut novel, Lessons in Chemistry, a bestseller that's resonated with millions of readers, so much so that it's been translated into 39 languages and has been optioned by Apple TV Plus for a screen adaptation starring none other than Academy Award winner Brie Larson. Author Bonnie Garmus is a California-born copywriter and mother of two who currently lives in London with her husband and dog, 99. She's also an open water swimmer and a rower, which bears a lot of significance in Lessons with Chemistry. Here to talk about this thoroughly enjoyable and surprisingly meaty book is Bonnie Garmus. Bonnie, welcome to TGE'S Current Read.
Thank you, Sam. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh my goodness, this book, let me tell you, it's been on my TBR for the past year. I've had such FOMO that I haven't read it. I'm so chuffed to finally have gotten it under my belt. It's risen to so much acclaim. It's if I can just list it. It's been a #1 Sunday Times and New York Times bestseller. It was the Goodreads Choice Best Debut Novel of the Year. It's been listed as Book of the Year for, I'm going to take a deep breath here because there's a lot, Guardian, Times, Sunday Times, Good Housekeeping, Women in Homes, Stylist, The Times Literary Supplement, Oprah Daily, Newsweek, Mail on Sunday, New York Times, India Night, The Hay Festival, Amazon. There's one recently, you recently came back from a literary festival. People are loving this book. Bonnie, it's safe to say, right? Lessons in Chemistry, fans, do not mess around. People love it. I know why I love it. And we're going to get into it. Why do you think people love it? Why does it resonate?
Well, I think it may be because, and honestly, I can't speak for readers. Readers tell me, though, that they identify with the struggles Elizabeth Zott has. And they identify with the way she approaches life. She decides not to accept limits for herself. That's a personal decision she makes. And then she leads her life accordingly. And I think for me, when I was writing Elizabeth Zott, I was writing a role model for myself.
I love Elizabeth. She's an institution. We're gonna get into why she is one, what makes her an institution. But for those who have yet to read the book, Tyler is among them. I've convinced her, I think, that this book is on her next read to, you've got to bump it up the TBR list, Tyler. Introduce us to Elizabeth Zott. What's that elevator pitch? What is Lessons in Chemistry all about?
Lessons in Chemistry is really about not accepting limits for yourself that other people decide they have the right to put on you. And these are limits, things varied from sexism to racism to even climate change. The ideas that are very old in our society, that women are less capable than men somehow, or that race is actually something that we should give credence to in terms of intelligence or anything like that, is completely far-fetched, and it always has been. Science tells us otherwise, and I have no idea why we don't listen to science a little more carefully. But that's what really Lessons in Chemistry explores, is this idea that we should not be held back by society, but we should be perhaps following the rules of chemistry to rule our life, to live our lives more effectively.
Okay, I've got such a good question on that, but I'm not going to skip ahead because this first paragraph is probably the best first paragraph that I've read in a long time, certainly in recent memory. One of the best introductory paragraphs. I didn't ask you before, but have you got a book with you? Have you got a copy?
I do. Hold on. I have several copies in lots of languages.
I love it. That first paragraph, could you read it for us? Because, man, as soon as I read it, I'm like, this is why people have been talking about this book for a year, and I don't know why I never read it until now.
All right. It starts out November 1961. Back in 1961, when women wore shirt-waist dresses and joined garden clubs, and drove legions of children around in seatbeltless cars without giving it a second thought. Back before anyone knew there'd even be a 60s movement, much less one that its participants would spend the next 60 years chronicling. Back when the big wars were over and the secret wars had just begun, and people were starting to think fresh and believe everything was possible. The 30-year-old mother of Madeline Zott rose before dawn every morning and felt certain of just one thing. Her life was over.
Oh, man. If that doesn't get you to the bookstore ASAP, then I don't know what will. Bonnie, we can talk at length about what Lessons in Chemistry says about feminism. Stephen King, for some reason, is quoted a lot in interviews and in readings with regard to this book. He called it the catch-22 of early feminism and says it's witty and hilarious, but also uses the word angry, which among feminists might raise their ire even more. But you have a great story to tell on how these first pages came to light. Can you relay it? Was that you channeling that anger that Stephen King is talking about?
Yeah, I think he's right about that. I do agree with you, though, that women are often called angry, which is inappropriate, honestly. But I think anger is also an emotion that we all have, and it's an important one. In terms of how the book started, it did come from anger, and I now call it constructive anger. But what happened was I'd been in a meeting. I was the only woman in the meeting. It was a technology meeting in the Bay Area, and I had just finished presenting my ideas for a major campaign. In that meeting, after my presentation, which I thought, of course, was very good, no one said anything. And then a few minutes later, the vice president, who was new to the team, proceeded to read from my PowerPoint slide and say, this is what I think we should do. And he acted as if all the ideas were his own. He actually put his name on the project, on my ideas, and said that they were his. And I looked around the room and I looked for support amongst my male colleagues, many of whom I'd worked with for over 10 years. And no one came to my rescue. So I came to my own rescue and I said, these are actually my ideas and I'm happy to talk about them further. And it was as if I wasn't even sitting there. Everyone talked around me or over me, but it was as if I didn't exist. And at that time, I thought, how can this be possible in this time? We're in the 2000s. You've got to be kidding me. So I went back to my desk, and instead of working on what I was supposed to be working on and needed to be done that day by 5, I wrote the first chapter of Lessons in Chemistry.
Oh,
on time.
I love that story. I love that story. Katala's clapping, so I'm going to add a round of applause. You showed them, but I can relate. That story's happened to me. Tyler, I'm sure it's happened to you. She's sitting across from me here, nodding. My friends, especially those in corporate, every week there's a story like that. And that's why. That's the magic of this book, because Elizabeth doesn't put up with it. Speaking about chemistry, though, there's a lot at play in this book. It's an overarching theme. In my work I dabble in some copywriting. I'm not a copywriter, I'm more a content writer. But what you often say is, in your interviews, you mention, that you don't kind of ascribe to being a writer that writes what you know. You write what you don't know. I can so relate to that. So you bought a chemistry book off eBay as part of your research for this book. And I'm sure there was lots else that you had to research. But that's how you kind of pulled the plaster on the chemistry side of things.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I'm glad that you said that you also don't write what you know, because I think that's kind of a limiting, actually. We're capable of learning lots and lots of things, and I'm interested and curious about lots of things. So for me, learning chemistry, I have to admit, it was harder than I thought it was going to be. Definitely harder than I thought.
More than high school, your basic high school balancing act.
That is exactly right. But if I hadn't put in the effort, I realized I would have never understood the basics of chemistry, which is, they call it the central science for a reason. It touches everything in our lives every single day. Everything around you is chemistry. Everything around you is atoms and molecules. You are as well. And how we actually operate in the world is well, that's the key to chemistry. It's also the science of balance. And there's a theme of balance throughout the book.
Yes, so I was gonna that theme, that overarching theme for me. I mean, it's called that. It was gonna be called Introduction to Chemistry.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken.
It was. That was my big idea, and my agent liked the title too. But the night before she was going to present it at the Frankfurt Book Fair, we very quickly determined, or rather, she did, that it was being slotted as nonfiction. And I could see it. We could both see it dying this slow death in the nonfiction section. So we had a few minutes to change it. And she said, how about lessons in chemistry? Yeah, really. I mean, we had about 2 minutes. And she said, how about lessons in chemistry? And I said, great.
Wow. I mean, it's stuck. But this is the lessons for me is such a great word, because in it comes, the book weaves in, obviously cooking, because that's what Elizabeth ends up doing, but actually teaching chemistry, because cooking is chemistry. Cooking, right. Sex, love, relationships, workspaces, toxic workspaces, even rowing in the book feels very formulaic in a way that pairs well with chemistry, that has that balance, right? So on page 86 also, I'm going to bring it up if you don't mind. Sure. You mentioned something about Calvin and chemistry, and I'm just like, well, here's the lessons in chemistry, the lessons. The book is replete with these lessons. How, as a child, so he trudged slowly, Calvin, Elizabeth's love interest, trudged slowly back to his classroom, thinking about the man who he was told as his dad, thinking of ways to make him come back. So Calvin's at a home for boys, and he had to come back, but the only things that ever showed up were more science books. And that, he read all the books in his new to the scene father had sent, devoured them as if they were love, stocking his broken heart with theories and algorithms, determined to uncover the chemistry he and his father had. And you go on, but it's so beautifully put, and it just is this thread pulled throughout the book, throughout the relationships. I mentioned that rowing for me is also a type of chemistry. And so Elizabeth wonders with surprise if rowing is truly as egalitarian as it feels when she's introduced to it. She was certainly included with a lot less hesitation than she was in the workplace. You're a rower.
Yeah.
Is it egalitarian by nature, rowing?
It's actually not. However, you can ask any rower, if a person is in a boat, it doesn't matter what their sex is. It matters how well they row, because all the rowers care about in the long run is a set boat. And a set boat is it is a balanced boat, and it moves very quickly through the water. If you have someone in it who doesn't row well, you can't have a set boat. And everyone, regardless if they're a man or a woman, want that person out of the boat immediately. Rowing is the sort of sport that requires that everyone, man or woman, row the same. And so it's the sport of balance. It's a beautiful sport. It's also really strange that, you work so hard, but you're working so hard within a very confined idea of how one rows. And it does require enormous cooperation between people who may or may not like each other, who may or may not be the same sex or the same size or whatever. It's the skill of working together in rowing that makes a boat go.
And that relationship is brought in between Calvin and Elizabeth. They kind of slot in. I didn't mark the page, but it's just a beautiful way of putting a relationship that just works. And I think that is mirrored in the rowing scenes. So you mention about their relationship. If relationships were puzzles, then theirs was solved from the get-go, as if someone shook out the box and watched from above as each separate piece landed exactly right, slipping into one another, fully interlocked into a picture that made sense. There's that balance, that chemistry. That's what you're mentioning with regard to the rowing, and it's exactly opposite to what life is, firstly, and the workplace that Elizabeth finds herself in.
Yeah, exactly right. I think, rowing is a really good metaphor for a workplace that works. If a boat is moving well, it's because the people have set aside their petty differences and they decide they have the same goal and they row as one. And they may get out of the boat and not like each other very much, but they've set the same goal and they agree to work with each other and support each other the entire time.
Oh, I wonder how many workplaces are like that, Bonnie.
I haven't found one.
I haven't found one either. We'll keep trying, but that's also why I'm a freelancer. Let's be honest, yeah.
Exactly.
So chemistry brings in the balance and the logic for me. It's how Elizabeth seems to make sense in the world. Like I said, she's an institution. She's a character so real in the lives of anyone who has read the book, but also very straightforward and straight-laced. And I keep thinking she's on the spectrum. Would you say she might be on the spectrum?
I hear that a lot. I actually love that question because, a lot of people think being on the spectrum is bad. I didn't write her to be on the spectrum. To be honest, she's based on the foundations of Stoicism, as written by Marcus Aurelius. She believes in self-responsibility. She's a rationalist. She believes in logic, evidence, scientific evidence. She believes in pulling your weight in society. And so it's really interesting because to me, those are very, very positive qualities. And sometimes I think being on the spectrum gets a bad rap, and it shouldn't, because some of the most brilliant people in the world are on the spectrum. For instance, Greta Thunberg, and they have delivered more to our society than most average people, most people who aren't on the spectrum. So I say, I did a Zoom group of all adults on the spectrum. And it was one of the best Zoom groups I've had because they felt like they were fairly represented as courageous, which is a lot of what Stoicism is about and Elizabeth Zott is about. And if you are on the spectrum, you probably feel like you don't fit in, and yet you do. You definitely do.
It's seeing things, and as a parent and in my work as a parenting journalist, looking at people who are on the spectrum as differently wired, and that word difference is also problematic, but just acknowledging that something is not a problem or abnormal. It's just human beings are all different, and that's why we look at it as this beautiful spectrum, right? So
exactly.
I love that it's not outwardly mentioned, and you never had that idea of Elizabeth, but that's also how she is represented, and that idea of representation came across. It really did come across strongly for me. Even she and Calvin have such a unique relationship. It's like a grown-up, more intellectual take on Sheldon and Amy from The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, and you know what? It's so funny. I've never seen that show, and I feel like I know I'm a terrible TV watcher. I mean, I do watch things. I definitely watch things. I just think I watch stupid things. And so I shouldn't say that because now I can't tell you what I watch. But I think it's so interesting. I still haven't seen that show, and I've heard that comparison before. So I will definitely get to it.
Well, it's nice because it makes it means that your writing is also it stands on its own. It's unique. So you didn't draw inspiration from anyone. That's what makes Elizabeth so real. Is she's her own. She's an individual. So we can pull up similarities, but she really is something else. I think a lot of characters from her inception are gonna be mirrored on. Oh, that reminds us of Elizabeth Zott because she is so strong. And as you mentioned, stoic. Where does she get her self-assuredness from? Because we found out later about her family situation. And I'm not going to go into that. But I was wondering, because for me, there wasn't like, that's why she's like that. Or that, there's no distinct, even though things do happen to her throughout the course of her life, for me, there's no distinct, okay, she's taken this very self-assured stance because of that incident. It's maybe many incidents. I don't know. What makes her so self-assured?
Well, I think part of it is she does have confidence in herself because she's proven to herself that, she's self-educated. She had to do that on her own. And I think if you are able to do that and you're successful at it, and believe me, many people are, you can learn just about anything at the library. I learned basic chemistry myself, and I am not a scientist. So you can teach yourself things. There are a lot of people who've written really good books on things. But in terms of Elizabeth, I think she is really, again, she has those stoic characters of not getting sidelined by things that, oh, women aren't capable of this, or you're not smart enough to do this. She just refuses to believe that. And so when I was writing her as a role model, how many times have I thought in my life where I thought, oh, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not attractive enough, or in this whole idea of enough is ridiculous. Elizabeth Zott has chosen not to go down that route. In the book, you don't see her constantly fixing her hair or worrying about what she looks like. She doesn't mince words. She says what she thinks. And it's really a joy to write someone like that. But you're right, it doesn't all come from her background. When you have a baby, the baby is just who they are. Their personality is already there. And as they get older, the personality manifests in various ways. For her, I think she was born and she was strong. But I think, of course, she's tested over and over in that strength.
Oh, yes. What's his name?
Yeah.
Donati. She doesn't respond to Dr. Donati's jibes.
I know.
But
she's not.
Every now and then there's like a sliver of, it's going to get her. No, she's not, It's like it's relatable because you can almost see that it's getting under her skin, but she just carries on. She breaks down that kitchen, baby.
Yeah. And I think it's a really strong message for women to remember that there are a lot of things in everyone's life. No one gets out of life unscathed. Everybody is going to have something pretty bad happen to them. And I think I was trying to write a character who has to deal with that, but decides to deal with it in the way she feels will make her go on, make her continue to go towards her goal. And for me, that was really important.
So motherhood is a prominent theme in the book. Elizabeth ends her cooking show, Supper at 6, with the tagline, "Children, set the table, your mother needs a moment to herself." This tagline also has a prominent spot on your website, incidentally. And a lot of what is said in the book about motherhood resonates for me. Did you draw from your own experience here? Or perhaps, considering the timing and the framework, did you think about how your own mother mothered?
Exactly both of those, Sam. I think, when I was writing that line, "Children, set the table, your mother needs a moment to herself," my thought in the back of my head was that children would be watching this show because Elizabeth Zott is kind of irresistible in these really odd ways. You kind of want to watch her because you don't often see such a confident woman, especially back then, on television with such interesting information to impart. But the other thing was, I thought, she is setting the tone for the next generation. She's telling these children that their mother is worthy and that she's worthy of their respect and that they need to pitch in and help. Everyone has a job. She's not there to serve them. She's not there to be their maid. She's there because she's doing something really, really important that feeds them, nourishes their brains. They move on, et cetera, et cetera. So these lessons that she's imparting start with children.
I really enjoy that take on things. It's really set in the 1950s, and considering that and a really modern take on. Also, you can see it pulls through the way that you, as a writer, have looked at parenting, and it's a really unique way to kind of see children as individuals, because certainly she doesn't follow a formula. Or what society assumes should be done in terms of parenting and the way she raises Madeline. And then that kind of continues and is pulled through into her cooking show, which is for moms. I It's also really affirming for me as a mother, having read that. I just thought, yes, okay, this is why we're all loving on this book so much. Another reason why we're loving on it is 6:30. 6:30, the dog. And I don't think anyone comes out of an interview with you, Bonnie, about this book without mentioning 6:30. So what's interesting to me is 6:30 adds a very unique voice to the story. But I want to talk to you about the technicalities of writing here, because what's interesting to me is you use 6:30 and several of the other characters, Harriet in the most hilarious way, and all of the other kind of supportive characters. You change voices so effortlessly. And sometimes you use a line break, but sometimes within a paragraph that transition happens. As a writer, are you aware that this is really hard to do? Did it just come naturally with you?
That actually comes pretty naturally to me, but it is really funny. I know I'm doing it, and I know that most writing books disapprove. If you go to a writing class, they'll say you're not allowed to do this.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, luckily with copywriting, you're kind of encouraged to break rules. And so for me, I think it's really important never to talk down to your audience, never to assume they can't follow what you're doing. And I haven't had any pushback so far. Everyone says, yeah, of course I can follow this, because the voices are distinct enough that you could tell whose head you're in at any given time, including the dog.
So 6:30 is the only voice in the novel based on a real character. Tell me more about Friday. 6:30, by the way, listeners, has his own or her own. It's his. He's a he.
His own.
Has his own Instagram page, but it's actually 99's Facebook
it's
page.
It's actually 99.
So tell us about Friday, 99, and 6:30, and how they all correlate.
So 6:30 was based on my dog Friday. We adopted her from a shelter, and she'd been very badly abused. She had been so badly abused that her previous owner went to jail. And so when we adopted her, and by the way, I should just add, I didn't want to adopt this dog. She was in terrible shape, and she smelled really oddly, which she never lost. And she just obviously had been, I was afraid of the trauma that she'd been through. But my kids thought she was adorable for some reason. And so we brought her home. We listened to our kids, and she turned out to be Einstein. She was really, really smart. We didn't set out to teach her words. Friday would simply watch our mouths move, and learn what we were saying, different nouns and things. So, and she would demonstrate all the time what she knew. When we were transferred abroad to Switzerland, she learned German. I mean, the dog was really smart. And I think I had, for a very long period of time, underestimated just how smart she was. And it made me think, oh my gosh, if my dog can do this, what do animals know how to do? What do other animals do that we just don't know? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, animals have, especially dogs, have a heightened sense of smell. If any of us had that, we would be some sort of superhero, and we would have our own TV show. We would be, but instead we just go, oh yeah, they're really good at smelling. Well, it's beyond that. It's way beyond what we can learn from sniffing. So there are all these things about dogs that I became very interested in. And as it turns out, there are dogs who know far more words than 6:30 does. 6:30 learns over 600. There's a famous dog that learned over 1,000. People actually know how to teach their dogs words, and they can demonstrate that they know. In terms of 99, we adopted her after Friday died, and her name isn't related to 6:30. She's just named after a friend of mine who died. But when we were kids, we always called each other 86 and 99 after an old TV show called Get Smart. And when she died, I was sad, and I just resurrected her name. And by doing that, it was like having her back in my life. So it's been great. And 99 loves her name.
Well, for any dog lovers, they'll know that this is the ultimate compliment, to name your dog after someone you so dearly love. Yeah. I must say, veering away from the dog talk, and I would love to carry, but we do have to wrap up at some point. I've just acquired a border collie. Zara who has come into my life, and so I would love to just wax lyrical about dogs with you all day. Maybe on another Zoom call, Bonnie.
I will tell you that there's a famous dog who's a border collie. I think his name was Casper, who learned over 1,000 words.
I can believe it. My dog is smart. So like, challenge accepted. Yeah. I'm going to take on this challenge. Watch the space.
Good for you.
So okay. I want to talk about these side characters. I would love to just delve into all of them, into Walter Pine, into Harriet. I love Harriet. Elizabeth was actually a side character in the same way in your first novel, which was shelved, right? So
yep. It was not going anywhere. But yeah, she was in there just 3 sentences long. But I knew that she was a chemist and she had a TV show and she was depressed. That's all I knew about her.
Bonnie, I can't tell you how badly I want to read that novel. Do you think you'll ever dust it off?
I don't know. I keep getting asked that. I'm working on something else right now that has nothing to do with the Zotts. And I think, for me, it's always really important to leave people wanting more than to overstay my welcome. So I'm very afraid of overstaying welcomes because we've all seen how sequels can disappoint or whatever. I'm very careful about that. But who knows? Who knows? Because the reason I could write Mad as a child was because I knew who she became as an adult.
Wow. You know what? I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but I do tend to agree with you. Leave us wanting more because that's what makes them so... She's an enigma, isn't she? Elizabeth Zott is an enigma. Of course, this book, Lessons in Chemistry, has been optioned by AppleTV and is being adapted for the screen into an 8-part limited series. Can you tell us more about what we can expect? Are some lessons in chemistry print sticklers going to be angry that certain characters or situations were altered? Or do you think readers are going to love on-screen Elizabeth as much as we love her in print?
I think that Brie Larson turns out to be the perfect choice for Elizabeth Zott. She is an Academy Award winner for a reason, and I think viewers will see that she absolutely fulfills that role absolutely perfectly. And yes, there are plenty of changes. That's how adaptations work. They can't make a book, a series be exactly like the book. It's not possible. So they have free reign to do what they want. And I have a great team of people. And I think that hopefully it will turn out really well. I'm really excited for them. But, again, it won't be the book. And that's the natural evolution of a book going from book to screen.
My last question has nothing to do with lessons or your upcoming work, which I'm excited about. But I won't ask you more. I'm just really curious about what is currently on your bedside table. Assuming you read in bed, what are you reading now?
Okay, this is embarrassing because I can't remember her last name, but there's a book I'm reading called In Memoriam that just came out. I think it's Alice, and I want to say it starts with a V, but I can't remember. And I'm also reading, hold on. I'm reading a nonfiction book called The Bookseller's Tale, and it's written by a British author, and it's all about, about being a bookseller and why we read in the first place. And I really recommend this. It's by Martin Latham. And I was just introduced to it 1 week ago, and I love it.
I love that.
So
and
both of those.
You read a lot of nonfiction.
I read a lot of nonfiction, a lot. I love nonfiction. And I think, especially when I'm writing, I don't like to be in someone else's story. It's not because I think I'll adapt it into my own. It's that I can't hear my characters as well if I'm reading other people's characters.
I can believe that. I can really believe that. So Alice Wynne, is that correct? In Memoriam.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
Alice Wynne.
Yeah.
Well, great. I'm going to look into that because I have not heard of that book. And also your nonfiction read. I'm also an avid nonfiction reader.
Oh, good.
Oh, Bonnie. It's I could pick your writing brain for another day and a half. We could talk about dogs for another day and a half more. How about a weekend away?
I know. I'm ready. Okay. I need one.
Good. First, I'm going to come up to London and we're going to watch A Little Life on the West End.
Oh, that's what I want to go see too.
Go
Oh,
see it on my
absolutely.
behalf because I can't get to London right now, but I'm so dying to. Let me know how it is. But yes, we're gonna go on that weekend away. I will hit you up. Sadly,
Okay.
all good things must come to an end, including this interview. I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you, and unfortunately, lessons in chemistry also had to come to an end. But
Yeah, that's true. But onward.
we look onward. We look forward to number 2. And we look forward to the show. And congratulations on a really, really successful debut.
Thank you for inviting me, both of you, Sam and Tyler. I really appreciate it. And Tyler, you better read this book now.
Yes. We will report back.
Right.
Bonnie. Thanks so much for joining me on TGE's Current Read.
Thank you.